Hello, movie buff. There are movies that are warmly praised by movie critics, but for one reason or another, they failed at the box office and ended up undeservedly missing the votes of their audiences around the world. I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't even heard of some of them. Here's Movie Fanatic and the most underrated movies in history. Let's go!
I am risking my life for you.
You are risking my life so you can save your pride.
The Last Duel, a relatively recent Ridley Scott movie, failing on all fronts, while being a really meaningful and well-made movie. Matt Damon, Adam Driver, and Jodie Comer in the lead roles. Obviously, with a cast like that, it's just impossible not to collect the box office. But it did. France, late 14th century. Relations between the knight Jean de Courrouges and his fellow knight and neighbor Jacques Legris gradually deteriorate, and the case comes to an irresolvable conflict. Insulted, Courrouges turns for help to King Charles VI of France, and the latter decides the opponents must resolve the dispute in a deadly duel. It would seem that the usual plot for a movie of this genre, but everything is not so simple. The whole movie, The Last Duel, is a repeated series of scenes on how all the main characters looked at the same moments. Basically, here Ridley has given us all the opportunity to be in the shoes of each of the characters in this story. It's amazing, and not a technique used in movies as often as I'd like to think. The marketing was weak, and the advertising strategy was very poorly defined. The studio failed to distinguish this film for the audience among other films on medieval themes, and critics in turn finished this movie story, putting the final nail in the coffin. The movie grossed only $30 million at the box office. This is a total failure, given the big name of the director and the main stars of the tape. It's astounding. Fortunately for Ridley, by the same year, he prepared another tape with the same Adam Driver, House of Gucci, which brought a good box office. It's also true, a decent work. In general, do not pay attention to the box office of The Last Duel. It is worthy of your attention. This project, showing reality from different sides, is very important, especially today, when the whole world has talked about how differently men and women often see the same situations.
One of us has lied. Let us let God decide.
Hunden ska sluta pinka på våra plattor.
Lyssna inte på den elaka gubben, prins.
A Man Called Ove. Do you know many good movies made in Sweden that have gone global? I don't think so. But this is a rare case, and this movie, I'll tell you right away, is the third most popular Swedish movie of all time. Ove is an elderly, nagging, grumpy man who annoys his neighbors with his nagging. He gets furious at the sight of garbage thrown in the wrong place or an improperly parked car, and spits on the light-hearted family of newcomers, in which the father of the family and the nail is not able to hammer. But Ove can do everything. In the house and in the garage, he always has a perfect order, as well as in his thoughts, except that life has long ceased to make sense to him. The movie is based on the book of the same name, insanely, by the way, popular today around the world. The English version of the book hit the New York Times bestseller list only 18 months after publication, and stayed there, think about it, for 42 weeks. What depression is today hardly needs to be explained to anyone, and many people are unfortunately familiar with this condition. But in Ove's case, the problem is too deep. That's one of the main reasons why this life-affirming film is worth seeing for everyone. Despite all this, the movie A Man Called Ove should absolutely be considered underrated. Many viewers prefer movies in their native language or are hesitant to watch movies with subtitles. This was a problem, but it could only be solved by worldwide distribution, which is not easy to arrange. Although the movie was a success in Sweden and other parts of Europe, there were problems with its international distribution. Also, many viewers were put off by the mixture of two genres that did not coincide with each other, drama and comedy. Well, the Swedish cultural specificity is another important reason why the mass audience never got to know about this miracle. I highly recommend watching it.
Vill du gifta dig med mig?
Ja!
Why are you doing this, Mrs. Collins?
You have stopped looking for my son.
Why should we
That
be
is your
looking for
responsibility.
someone we've already found?
Changeling. Back to the beautiful 2000s. One of the best works of the lovely Angelina Jolie. The action of the picture develops in Los Angeles in the 20s of the last century. Having addressed to the police with a statement about the disappearance of a child, the protagonist soon receives her son, but informs the police that it is not her child. Christine announces to the policeman that despite the external resemblance to her son, the child found is not Walter. Representatives of the law do not believe the words of the woman, and when she insists on her version, put the poor mother in a mental institution. Filmed this tape, King of Westerns, Clint Eastwood. His work definitely deserves more recognition. It must be said that Angelina Jolie herself put out here on all possible percentages. Roles of femme fatale beauties are great, but not every actress of this plan can boast dramatic talent, and Angelina has shown here that she's perfect at it. It is simply impossible not to believe her acting. This movie, based on real events, raises many important topics: police corruption, mental health, women's rights. These topics are relevant to this day. The film did not collect much money in theaters, also because of insufficient advertising and strong competition with other films. At that time, in theaters went such tapes as What Happens in Vegas, Iron Man, and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. To compete with such large projects, this drama was not able to. So until now, for many viewers, this tape remained in the shadows. Be sure to watch the movie Changeling. It is worth it.
I want my son back. I want my son back.
Whose land is this? My land.
Killers of the Flower Moon, one of the most underrated films of both Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio. The movie was nominated for an Academy Award in as many as 10 categories, but did not win. Imagine, not a single one. The movie is about an FBI investigation in the 1920s Osage County. Shortly after World War I, Ernest Bernhard, who served in France as a cook, arrives in Oklahoma, home to a large Indian reservation that has suddenly become rich because of oil discovered on their land. His uncle William Hale, nicknamed King, a friend of the Indians and a big man, lives there. King convinces Ernest to ask Ernest to marry a young woman from a wealthy Indian family. The idea is that the land rights of this family will eventually pass to them, and all it takes is for Molly's mom, her sisters, and herself to die. This movie had a lot of problems when it first started. As a result, with a budget of $200 million to collect in the world, box office managed to collect only $157 million, even despite the fact that this movie is rated R, that is, for adults only. It is oversaturated with conversations and lasts more than 3 hours. All the same, the failure of the tape at the box office is surprising. The audience at the Cannes Film Festival, after the screening, welcomed the movie with 9 minutes of applause. I think we should blame here the difficult for the American viewer theme, in which the rest of the planet has never been immersed, by the way. Well, and most importantly, the main problems perhaps are related precisely to the strikes of writers and actors, which led to the inability to promote the movie by the leading actors. That's why most viewers never learned about the existence of this tape, unfortunately.
You know they don't happen anymore.
Ready. Set up.
Go!
The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift. Don't be surprised. Yes, one part of Afterburner is indeed clearly underrated. The Fast and Furious franchise is known for its lucrative races and, without spin-offs, 10 movies where Vin Diesel and his crew take on anything that moves. But among these similar action movies, a special movie stands out: Triple Afterburner. High school student Sean only gets into trouble. After another outing of improvised races and an accident, the guy already faces prison. Then his mother decides to send him to his father in Japan. On the first day in a Japanese school, Sean finds a new teacher and a new hobby, drifting. After the unsuccessful second movie, director Justin Lin took up the franchise and made a bold step. He made a completely different movie about cars, changing the characters and the place of action. The third installment, known as Tokyo Drift, is an experiment where a classic story with a dash of martial arts is told in neon sets, however, inverted and adjusted to the racing theme. Instead of battle scenes, there are cars and winding tracks. And it was really the right decision, which not everyone could enjoy. Fans of the franchise take a bias to this story, unlike many of the other films in the series, which are fairly mundane. Tokyo Drift does have a philosophical depth that makes Triple Afterburner the most original and interesting movie in the series.
Hey, look, watch out!
Who were these demons?
Assassins, trained in the art of quick death.
Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. The protagonist of this adaptation of the cult computer game, young Prince Dastan, always defeated his enemies in battle, but lost the kingdom because of the intrigues of the treacherous kingpin. Now Dastan will have to steal from the hands of the villain's powerful magical artifact that can turn back time and make its owner Lord of the World. To help Dastan defeat his enemies, he is aided by his brilliant skills in wielding cold weapons, as well as his incredible abilities in acrobatics and equilibrium. The game series, you will agree, was delightful, and Ubisoft in the 2000s created a real masterpiece, which was so popular that it was even decided to create a game, Prince of Persia: Assassins, later renamed Assassin's Creed, and became a separate independent project. The movie adaptation was a bit of a flop, but not so much that it failed at the box office. It managed to make back the budget, but it failed to make much money from the movie. Critics were dissatisfied with the plot, expecting a completely different story, although we must admit that adapting computer games for the big screen is usually insanely difficult. In the case of this adaptation, the story was essentially written from scratch, with a new plot and new characters. Even 15 years later, the graphics and special effects in this movie look amazing. The story turned out to be really very entertaining. The actors put out to the maximum. The creators of the tape are nothing to be ashamed of. The work is done to perfection, but unfortunately, the collections and scandals associated with the cast and did not allow removing the continuation. A very underrated movie.
That's impossible.
Difficult, not impossible.
It's okay, hey, you're safe.
What are you doing?
Hey, I said, what are you doing?
Promising Young Woman, a film shot for literally 6.5 million, while worthy of all possible honors, but left unnoticed by the mass audience. Once Cassandra studied at the university and set great expectations, but now she lives with her parents and works in a coffee shop in her 30s. The girl hides from loved ones that in the evenings she visits bars and other places of entertainment, where, pretending to be very drunk, hunting for men, falling for defenseless women, taking out her anger on the opposite sex. This is Cassandra's way of avenging the events of her college years. The main thing this film does is criticize societal stereotypes and prejudices about victims of violence and those who protect them. This is a crucial message that definitely deserves more recognition. It's a shame that not everyone gets the message of this story, although the message is presented very clearly, in my opinion. Believe me, from the finale of this tape, you will be shocked. The finale of the tape, Promising Young Woman, can definitely be called one of the most unexpected in the history of modern cinema. It is a pity that the movie won only one of the 5 nominations at the Oscars. But in which one?
The Oscar goes to Emerald Fennell, Promising Young Woman.
Best Screenplay. It's really beautiful.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
You felt it, didn't you? The power.
King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. Guy Ritchie, at the very beginning of his career, created his unique style, which he still adheres to. He was especially successful in the movie Sherlock Holmes. In familiar plots, he well brings action elements, which, although far from the original, still provide success for the movies with demanding audiences. But even here, it was not without failure. In the plot of the movie, young Arthur lives in the suburbs with his gang. He had no idea about his own royal origin, until one day he took in his hands the sword Excalibur. The sword begins to change Arthur. As a result, he joins the resistance and a mysterious young girl named Guinevere. He must learn to understand the magical weapons he has mastered, overcome himself, and unite the people in a fight against the dictator who murdered his parents and seized the crown. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, did not receive rave reviews from critics. This may be due to the fact that Ritchie deviated too much from traditional legends, or because there were a number of technical flaws, such as blurred foregrounds in some places, and, let's face it, overly artificial special effects in some places. At the same time, there are a lot of pluses here, which many viewers never saw. In fact, they did not see because of the negative reviews and the movie itself in principle. These shortcomings cannot greatly spoil the overall impression of the movie. One thing is certain, the story about King Arthur sounded new thanks to the excellent camera work. The dynamic scenes will keep you in suspense until the very end.
There's the king.
What is that?
Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. If everything is clear in principle with how to adapt a book or a computer game for the big screen, then everything is much more complicated with a board game. But in this case, everything turned out very well. According to the plot, the bard and adventurer Egan, together with his battle girlfriend Holga, escape from prison and go to tell the story of his daughter, who for the last few years was tutored by his former sidekick Forge. Upon arrival, it turns out that the one, with the support of a suspicious sorceress, Safina, not only fabulously rich and made governor, but also set the daughter against her father. Yes, and in general does not mind getting rid of the main characters. Having managed to fight off the executioners, the desperate couple plans a terrible revenge, and for this they will have to unite with the absent-minded magician and the dexterous druid and find the magic helmet, which was considered lost. Adapting a board game, of course, requires a deep understanding of how the mechanisms work. Each character is subject to the limitations and advantages of their race, class, weapons, armor, and the randomness of dice rolls. The budget of the movie eventually swelled to $150 million. There were problems with the advertising investment, and the story was not promoted well. Despite very good reviews from critics, many viewers never made it to the theaters. Given the advertising and the overall budget, the tape failed to break even, which is almost guaranteed to put a cross on any full-length sequels to this story. Paramount Pictures director Brian Robbins also said that a sequel could still be made, but with a much smaller budget due to the low box office receipts of the first movie. A TV spin-off series is known to be in development, but it's not certain that we'll end up seeing it, and if we do, we should not expect the same bright and expensive picture. Definitely one of the most underrated films of recent years.
He must have found a new den. Did he eat the last one?
I belong to the front. You belong to the tail. Keep your place.
Snowpiercer. If you think that Parasites is the only truly noteworthy work of Bong Joon-ho, you are sorely mistaken. 6 years earlier, he released another masterpiece, which many viewers do not know about until now, even though this movie was recently filmed in a full-fledged series that lived on small screens for 4 years. The not too distant future. 17 years ago, there was a technogenic catastrophe on the planet, where forests and gardens used to grow. Now there's only snow and ice, and life survived only in a giant train, rushing forward without stopping. In the first cars of the train, leave the ruling elite, and in the last cars, ordinary people. Life in the back of the train resembles a concentration camp, disease, poverty, and lawlessness of the overseers. It is here, from among the humiliated and insulted, that a man rises up, longing to restore justice. This idea has been conveyed to us in different ways through the movies, but this one is really very original indeed. Unfortunately, many people never noticed the top actors behind the beautiful makeup. Chris Evans and Tilda Swinton did some serious work, and the end result is eye candy. Of course, the budget of $40 million is not much for a story of this scale, so they had to save money on literally everything. Especially, the lack of money was reflected in the special effects, which are terrible here. They look very cheap, which also scared away many viewers. Try not to pay attention to this and just watch the tape Snowpiercer. The idea itself makes up for everything, believe me.
This is your destiny.
What in this video do you agree with, and what do you disagree with? And what other movie would you add to this list? We are waiting for your comments under this video right now. See you soon.